Welcome and thank you for joining us today for a webinar on how to use MDX in your IBM Planning Analytics environment. A few quick notes as we get going. Today's event is being recorded for future viewing, and we can send a copy of these slides after the event. And during the presentation, all attendees will be muted. If you have a question, type them into the Q&A section. We will try and answer them as we go along, but if we don't, we can certainly answer them afterwards. First, let me introduce our presenters. First is Lee Lazzaro. Lee Lazzaro is Revelwood's Planning Analytics partner leader. Lee has more than 2 decades of OLAP implementation experience working with TM1 and Planning Analytics. Also from the Revelwood team is Dylan Rossman. Dylan has a decade of financial experience and is involved in many of our recent Planning Analytics PAW implementations. Today's agenda, first we'll talk about Revelwood, then we'll move into what is MDX, some efforts into how to write MDX, when to use MDX in Planning Analytics, and then lastly, next steps. A little bit about Revelwood. Revelwood is an IBM Gold business partner, and we have been in business for over 25 years helping FP&A professionals solve their business problems. We have done hundreds of successful IBM Planning Analytics implementations worldwide with all types of companies that span various industries and sizes. We have a very deep bench of certified planning analytics consultants, and we pride ourselves in bringing not only the technical expertise, but also the business expertise needed to help with your FP&A needs. So with that said, I'll pass the presentation over back to Dylan.
Thanks, Dan. All right. So what is MDX, right? That's what we're here for. MDX stands for, in case you didn't know, multi-dimensional expression. You can think of it as an OLAP equivalent of SQL. So you can use SQL to pull data from your SQL database or pieces of your SQL database. And MDX is used in a similar fashion. You can use it to query dimensions, so pulling out a list of certain elements, whether it's a range of elements, a singular element. We'll get more into that later. Or you can use it to pull data points from cubes or create calculations using MDX. MDX is an industry standard language. The TM1/PA version is a little different than the industry standard. The TM1/PA version does not support the entire language, which we'll talk about in a second. But on the other hand, there are some specific functions and expressions that are added specifically for TM1/PA that you won't see outside of TM1. So getting to the general MDX functions that I just mentioned, there's about 150 of them that come natively to MDX, many of which are available in TM1. They are not all available. There are some exceptions to the rule, but many of them are. Some examples include a filter function, which you can use to filter a set based on a certain condition. So one example of that could be maybe you want to show all products in your product dimension that have revenue greater than $1 million. You can use the filter function via MDX to create a dynamic list to show that. And it'll update, again, it's dynamic, it'll update as new things meet that criteria. So you don't have to go ahead and update it manually. Some of the other commonly used functions include str to member or string to member. So I can take a text value, right, and turn that into a member element that I can use in my set. An example of that could be maybe I have a control cube where I have the current year stored in there. I can take that current year value, pull it from the control cube, and use it to drive my subset via MDX. Maybe I want to pull all the months of the current year for a particular report. I could do that kind of thing with string to member. And we'll get more into that as we get into the more advanced MDX stuff, but just to get your mind thinking. And the last one that I'm going to mention right now as an example is IIF, or if. It's basically the MDX equivalent to an if statement. So I can write an MDX statement that says, if this condition equals true, then this, if not, then that sort of thing is something you can do entirely via MDX. You don't need to do anything in Excel or TM1 rules or Turbo Integrator. You can do that entirely self-contained in MDX, which is nice. So what TM1/PA interfaces support MDX? The short answer is all of them in varying capacities. So the legacy tools, Architect Perspectives, if you've gone to the subset editor and got into the expression window, you've probably seen MDX. Maybe you've gone ahead and recorded your steps in the subset editor. When you're doing that, if you have the expression window open, you'll see that it is recording the MDX that's happening in the background. Think of that as sort of like your VBA recorder in Excel. Same sort of concept, except for MDX. And that exists, in the legacy tools. And that's probably most people's first introduction to MDX. Another example that we're going to be using today is PAW, so Play Analytics Workspace. Within the PAW ribbon, we can utilize MDX to create a cube view, or within our cube views, we can use MDX to drive what is being displayed for each one of our dimensions. So we're going to get into that a bit today. And then the last thing is PAX, or Play Analytics for Excel, PAFE. You can do cube views via Play Analytics for Excel via the MDX button you see highlighted here. You can also update MDX in the dimensions as well, similar to PAW. So really 3 options. There are some caveats in between each of them, but for purposes of today, we'll keep it simple. So I mentioned earlier, there are some TM1 specific functions for MDX. These functions do not exist outside of TM1. They are specifically for TM1. And if you've gone through the Architect MDX recorder, you've probably seen some of these as you go ahead and click through the subset editor buttons and build out your subset. TM1 filtered by pattern is equivalent to your wildcard search. So when you're in the subset editor and you do your wildcard search, or maybe you search for 100 star in your account dimension to pull all the accounts to start with 100, that's your equivalent to TM1 filtered by pattern. So you can use this function to do those wildcard searches within your custom MDX. Another one is TM1 filtered by level. So the equivalent of filtering your set by a certain level. Maybe you want to go ahead and pull in all of the base level elements. If you're in Architect or Perspectives, you can do that by filtering by level when you click the little filter button and then choose level 0. That'll give you all your base levels. And in the background, what's happening is it's using this TM1 filter by level function. And we'll see some of this today as well. TM1 drill down member, the equivalent of expanding on a member or an element in your subset editor. So maybe I have the year 2022 as a parent element. And when I expand that, what's going on in the background is it's doing TM1 drill down by member on the 2022 element. And now I see all my quarters. So this is very common as you are clicking around in the background. MDX is being created where it's doing all these drill downs. TM1 sort. So the ability to sort your list alphabetically or numerically by ascending or descending order. So maybe you want a list of base level accounts and you want it to be numerically ordered. You can do that. Or maybe you have a list of products or some other dimension that would be alphabetical elements, and you can sort those from A to Z or Z to A using TM1 sort. There is a button in the subset editor that does take care of that, and that is the equivalent of this TM1 sort. And the last one that I'm going to mention right now is the TM1 subset all. Anytime you hit the all button in your subset editor, in the background, MDX is doing TM1 subset all, which is returning all the members of your dimension, all the elements of your dimension, without any duplicates. So if you have members or elements showing up in multiple areas, it's not going to duplicate them. It's going to show everything once. So now we're going to move on to the MDX syntax. You'll see I kind of color coded a pretty simple MDX statement up top here. So what you're going to see is within the green, we have these brackets, right? And I think the first thing that people generally struggle with MDX when they're first introduced to it is, why do we have all these different things, right? Why do we have brackets, parentheses, curly braces? What's the difference? Why is this using brackets? Why is this using parentheses? Why is this using curly braces? So I'm going to break it down. If I'm looking at what's in green here, you see product, and this is in brackets. Anything TM1 structure-wise is going to be contained in brackets. So product in this case is actually a dimension. So if I have product, or if I have an element or a hierarchy or a cube name, all those things are going to be enclosed in brackets. So the green here. Now next in the blue, you'll see we have TM1 subset all, and then parentheses, and then close parentheses after the product. So the blue is defining our MDX function. So we mentioned some of them before, and you're seeing two of them right now. We have TM1 subset all, parentheses, our TM1 structure right here, product, and then close parenthesis. So just think of your blue as your MDX function. You see the same thing here with TM1 sort, and then the end part of the parameters, which I'll explain in a second. And then last but not least, we have the curly braces in red. So what the concept of the curly braces is taking the result of an MDX expression and turning it into a set. So in theory, we're doing TM1 subset all on the product dimension. And that's going to give you a result of all of the elements for the product dimension without any duplicates. So putting the curly braces around it turns this result of this function into a set, which we then pass into TM1 sort. And you'll see that TM1 sort has a second parameter here, ASC, which is basically just saying sort this in ascending order. So we are passing the product dimension into TM1 subset all, which is giving us a result of all the elements in this dimension without any duplicates. We're then passing that result into TM1 sort and sorting the results of that. So what we end up with is a list of all of the elements in the product dimension sorted in ascending order. So again, just to recap, anything in this case in brackets or in green on my screen, TM1 structure, anything in blue with parentheses, MDX function, and anything in brackets is a set, essentially. All right. So next, we're going to go ahead and move to a live demo of actually creating some MDX functions. So you're going to see that we're in PAW right now. I just opened up a new book, and I put a very simple view on the screen. So you'll see we have accounts on the rows, and then I just put actuals on the columns, and we have some selections up top. So nothing too crazy here. And what the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to work in the account dimensions. So let me go into my subset editor within PAW. Let me open that up. And what you're going to see is I have my set, and in the top right corner, we have this MDX button. So if I click on that, you're going to see we actually have an MDX statement already based on what the set already contained. Now, there are a few things you can do with the MDX editor here that I do want to point out. You can do searches in here. You can undo and redo. You can turn on wrap text, turn it off. You can reset the MDX to where you started. And what I also like, you can actually maximize this as well, so you're not working in such a small space. So we have a nice big screen to work on here. But for purposes of showing this, I'm actually going to keep it as a smaller screen so you can see the results at the same time. So what I can do, just to start very simply, I'm going to go ahead and pull a specific element using MDX. So in this case, maybe I just want to pull net income, right? So what I can actually do is, you'll see I have my brackets. I'm going to put the dimension name, BPM account, dot, and then brackets again, net income. So you'll see I have brackets, BPM account, dot, brackets, net income. If I commit that, you see I have net income. So just circling back to the syntax before, we have in brackets our TM1 structure, a dimension, and an element. And the dot just denotes within this dimension, we want this element. So this dimension dot element. All right, that's simple enough. Now something else we can do is utilize some of the other functions within MDX. And there are a lot. One of them that I like is called descendants. So if I want to use descendants, I can just type in descendants, parentheses, and then pass this value into descendants. So I added my function. I basically just wrapped the result of this being net income and passed it into descendants. So it's going to pass the value of net income into the descendants MDX function. And if I hit commit on that, what you're going to see is it's going to grab all the descendants of this net income element. So with a very, very short MDX statement expression, I can grab all the children of a particular element. So if you were to record this in the, in your perspectives or architect TM1 MDX recorder, it might not be quite as simple. You'll find that you can write much more simple and efficient MDX statements if you do it manually. So you'll see it can actually be very simple to get where you need to go. Now, something else we can do is, besides functions, we also have what's called properties, and we'll get more into this as we get to the advanced class next month. But I can actually take a dimension name, BPM account, and I can say BPM account dot members. So members is actually basically a property or modifier of BPM account. And when I commit that, you're going to see it's going to give me all of the members or elements of the BPM account dimension. Now, if you remember earlier, I mentioned TM1 subset all, which does something similar, but there is a slight difference. So I mentioned earlier that TM1 subset all will give you all dimensions, all the elements in your dimension, but it won't have any duplicates. With dot members, it will pull duplicates if certain elements exist in multiple spots. So you see right now, the way that this set looks using dot members, if I go ahead and I change this and I do TM1 subset all and pass BPM account into that, and again, you'll see BPM account surrounded in brackets and TM1 subset all surrounded in parentheses. I can commit that, and you see it looks a little different. And the reason being exactly what I said. It's not going to include any duplicates. It's really the equivalent of your all button in the subset editor, whereas members is pulling in everything. No matter how many times it shows up, it's going to pull it in 10 times if it shows up 10 times in your structure. And another thing that I do want to point out about the MDX editor within PAW or PAX for that matter, as opposed to the legacy tools, it's much easier to see. So you'll notice that certain things are in different colors. You'll see that the dimension name is in blue, the function's in purple. So that actually makes it a lot easier to see. You'll see if I click near the parentheses, it shows me the other parentheses. If I click near the brackets, it shows me the other brackets. Because as you get to a more complex statement, it does get quite difficult to manage. Did I close this parenthesis properly? Did I close the bracket properly? So I definitely recommend the new editors for this type of work. Now moving on to some other things that we can do with some basic MDX. Maybe I want to grab a range of elements, right? So maybe I want to grab from current assets to other assets, right? So maybe I want to grab anything that's in between these elements. So what I can do is I can actually reference BPM account, close bracket, dot current assets, which again, current assets is right here in the structure, close bracket. And then what I can do is put a colon in between this. I just realized I forgot assets. Put a colon in between this expression right here and another expression. So this is going to return current assets. And the second part of the expression, I'll put other assets. So I'll do BPM account dot other assets. So you'll see right now what I have is BPM account dot current assets, which will return current assets. Then I also have BPM account dot other assets, which will return other assets. But when I put this colon in between the two, what you're going to see happen is it's actually going to return anything that is positionally between the two on the same level. So, what you saw earlier is current assets, net, and then net PP&E, other assets. Those are all on the same level of elements, and it's just grabbing anything in between the two. It's not going down and grabbing any elements below this. Of course, if I were to expand this, I could access those, but in terms of the actual members that it's returning, it's only returning the members in between these two values within your structure on the same level. So that's something that could be useful. It's a little neat trick that you can apply with one little colon in between. Now, what we can also do, if I go back a second, maybe I want, for some reason, I want to see current assets through other assets. And then maybe, I don't know, I want to see the savings account through this petty cash account, right? So maybe I want to return a set that contains values, including current assets to other assets, and this savings account to this petty cash account. So what I can do is, if I put in brackets what I just had, so I'll just type in BPM account dot current assets, and then I do my colon BPM account dot other assets, and my bracket. And then what you're going to see now is I'm actually going to put a comma here. And then from there, what I'm going to do is BPM account dot, and then I believe the account I wanted was 100, 100. And then I'm going to do another colon, BPM account dot 110, 000, and my bracket. So hit commit on that. And what you're going to see is now I have my current assets through other assets, and I have 100, 100 through 110, 000. So I can merge expressions together like that as well. And there's also, you're not limited to two. You could do more than two. So if I put another comma, maybe I want to have net income at the bottom. I can do BPM account and bracket dot net income, bracket, commit that, and I say I have net income in there. And this will dynamically pull in anything that gets added in between current assets and other assets, as well as anything that's added in between the 100 account and the 110 000 account. So it will be dynamic as well. if you structurally add anything in between the two elements. Now, another thing that I want to touch on is formatting. So you'll see if I make this full screen, this is pretty easy to see. It's not too bad. I could probably clean it up a little bit. Maybe I space out the comma like that, maybe. And that just makes it a little easier to read. But something like this, it's not too bad if you don't do that. Now, another function that I want to touch on right now, just to kind of lead into the next webinar. Let me actually minimize this. So I mentioned before the filter function, right? Where I can go ahead and I can filter a set by a cube value or something in that matter. I can filter a set down by some kind of condition. The example that I mentioned is, maybe I want to see all my products that had $1 million in actual revenue. I can do that with the filter function. So I'm not going to type that out live. I do have something prepared to show. So let me actually put that in here just to kind of show you what is possible and how much you can really do with MDX. And we'll get more into this the next webinar. But so this is what a filter function could look like. And you'll see that I already formatted to make it a lot easier to read. This is where I really recommend good formatting for your MDX, because something like this, if you have this all bunched together, this could get unruly very quickly and really hard to read and pick apart. But you can see very clearly here, we actually have a subset all, a BPM account, and then we're filtering by level, so all 0 levels. So we're starting with the set of all our accounts, all our elements in BPM account, and only the base level elements, so all the base level accounts within the account dimension. And then from there, you see we have all these different things that we're referencing actuals and various other elements in the other dimensions. I'm not going to go too into depth on this for the purposes of this webinar, but you see at the very end, I have my condition. My condition being greater than 0. I could do greater than 1 million or what is it, 100,000, greater than 1 million. So I can do that as well. Let me minimize this and then let me commit this. So what you're going to see is it gave me a set of base level elements in the account dimension, and it's not in any particular order right now. I could have sorted it, but for purpose of this, it's not. It's just in whatever order it came through. But if I were to go ahead and apply this, what you're going to see is all of the accounts here are greater than 1 million. So for this particular intersection that I've defined, I have total company, total departments, etc. If I were to change any one of these, it would update and pull in whether accounts have 1 million for that particular intersection. But for purposes of this, I'm using top level across the board. And you'll see all of these accounts have actuals of greater than 1 million. Now, if I want to, for purposes of showing, if I go to MDX here, and I were to change this from 1 million to, let's say, 5 million, and commit that, you're going to see this is going to change. Hit apply. Now everything that we have left is greater than 5 million. And this is just a very simple use case. There are a lot of really cool things you can do, and we'll get into that for the next webinar. But anything that is over 5 million is showing up here dynamically. So as things change, as I change my selections, as data changes, it's automatically going to pull in any accounts that have a value greater than 5 million. And maybe another simple use case is maybe you have a variance element somewhere. Maybe you want to see any accounts that have a variance greater than a certain amount of dollars. You can have that dynamically pulled in via MDX on a dynamic report in Excel, where you have a report each month. I want to see all my accounts that have a variance compared to budget of X amount of dollars, and it's going to dynamically pull in any values that meet that criteria. So this was really the last thing that I wanted to show for purposes of this webinar. For the next webinar, we will touch on a lot more advanced stuff. We'll take this filter function to the next level. We'll touch on some of the other functions that I mentioned, like str to member or the if function and a whole bunch of other stuff. For purposes of right now, I'm going to stop the share and then resume with the PowerPoint. When to use MDX and TM1/Play Analytics. Great example that we showed today, dynamic subsets. So the ability to create a subset that I know I don't need to maintain. Some people, they have a static subset, it's fine. It doesn't update, you have to manually update it. In some situations, that's nice. But the dynamic subset is really powerful because it lets you account for any changes that go on in your dimension, any new elements that get added or deleted, any data that changes. If you're using a filter type function where you're filtering by a certain data point. So that's all going to be completely dynamic, no maintenance on your end in terms of updating the subset. Another that I mentioned is the idea of dynamic report rows. So within the Planning Analytics for Excel client, you're using MDX or some kind of subset to drive your dynamic report rows. So you can do a lot of really powerful things with MDX for your dynamic reports. You can even make your MDX itself dynamic based on the selections that you have within your Excel report. Maybe you do some kind of Excel concatenation type thing that updates the MDX code dynamically, which then updates your dimensions dynamically. So you can really make your reports incredibly dynamic in that sense, using MDX and the power of Excel. And the last one on here, Turbo Integrator. A lot of you may, when you're setting up maybe a zero out or a view in your prologue of your data load script or something like that, maybe you do it via the Turbo Integrator functions available to you. You can also do it via MDX if you want to create a view or a subset to load data from or to or zero out. You can create that via MDX, just via the MDX expression. No need to code anything out. And another thing that we didn't touch on today and really gets to the really advanced stuff, you can actually create cube views via MDX. But that's going to be more so within the advanced webinar.
Dylan, thanks for that. I hope that was very informative for everyone. So last couple of slides here. Revelwood's here to help. As you can see, we offer a variety of training courses about planning analytics. Those courses include, Planning Analytics Workspace, PAX, PAFE, administrator and developer classes. Also, if you have questions about your development approach or overall system performance, specific to rules, feeders, cube design, etc., we have many experts on our staff that can help you out. Either a real simple help or an overall project. So looking to provide you these resources. Okay, so as you know, Revelwood regularly hosts IBM Planning Analytics webinars. So just very quickly for you to see a list of all of our past events, we have a great YouTube site. Lee, I know, is featured prominently on that site, and now I think Dylan will as well. So you can see a few of the more popular webinars that we have there, but please visit that if you can. Also, our next webinar is coming up in November, specifically Wednesday, November 9th at 1 p.m. Same BAT channel, same BAT time. The topic for that next webinar will be how to use MDX in your IBM Planning Analytics environment. Part 2, this will be the more advanced features and topic for us to cover. Those include advanced MDX functions and real-life examples how Revelwood used MDX to solve customer issues and perform those complex reporting requirements. So with that said, we thank you very much. We will be wrapping up the webinar now. If you have Any questions or needed additional information, please reach out to Lee Lazaro or to our Revelwood website. We will be glad to provide you with any follow-up information or questions that you may have. Lee, I'll stop there. It looks like we may have some questions. Do we have time to address those, or should we address those via email?
We'll follow up via email with some of the open questions. Thanks for checking.
Okay. All right. So folks, thanks again for joining us today. Hope that was informative, and we look forward to you joining us on our next webinar. Thank you.